Let me begin by introducing this panel. We have a real great assortment of experts here. To the far left, my right, let me introduce you to Brian Balfour. He is the founder and VP of product at Viximo, a company building digital goods platform connecting content creators, brands, and publishers. And then next we have Amy Jo Kim. Amy Jo Kim is an internationally known designer of social games and online communities. She's the CEO of Shufflebrain, makers of smart games for social networks. And then let me introduce you to Lee Clancy. Lee is the VP of Product Development and GM of Direct Revenue at IMVU, an online destination where young adults can meet new people in 3D. And last, but certainly never least, let me introduce you to Sean Ryan. Sean Ryan is the CEO of Meez, an online social community that combines a virtual world, 3D avatars, and games. So welcome, everyone. I'm really excited to have this discussion with you today. So I think I'll just start with Brian at the very end and go down and ask each of you ask a question. And then once you've had a chance to respond, Brian, for example, others on the panel ought to feel free to just jump in and give your input, and feel free to bring up questions as we're going to. I don't need to completely drive this process. So with that in mind, one thing I wanted to ask is, in general, what processes do you use to decide what needs to go into a virtual item inventory?
So at Viximo, we're focused on connecting content creators with with publishers. So a lot of times we try to provide our content creators with the proper information that they need to decide what needs to go and where the gaps are in sort of the publisher's inventory. So we'll feed back demographic information, sort of prompting them around holidays and certain other special events to create certain content. So we'll poke and prod them and point them in the right direction, but for us it's a lot of just providing our content creators the right information for then to really learn about the user base and be able to figure out where the gaps and holes are of what users really want.
To quickly follow up, what are some of the tools that you offer content creators to help make those determinations?
So so like I said, it's a lot of sort of about the information that we feed back about the buying activities. So we'll provide statistics and information around what type of people are buying, what types of goods, what's popular, what's not, it's really about just providing the right information for them. It's not specifically tools per se.
Okay.
So I have a question. How do you manage scarcity?
How do we manage scarcity?
Or do you, is that an issue that comes up?
Sure. So right now it's a little more of a manual process, but the creators have sort of influence over the type of virtual brand that they want to create. So they'll point us in the right direction of what they want to create. If they want to create a very sort of high inventory item at a low price, or a lower inventory item at a higher price. And then we sort of have internal matrices depending on the publisher and in the context of what the right inventory is for that exact item.
Did anyone else want to jump in there?
I was just going to jump in. I think the tools point that you mentioned actually is I think really important. At IMVU we have 4,000 products or so that get added to our catalog every day, and there's about 1.8 million products in the catalog, which is the world's largest catalog of digital goods. One of the things that we really try to do a lot for is help our creators, the people building these digital goods, to give them lots of tools and education, so that we sort of take the view that anybody at some point could become a digital goods creator if you provide them enough support from a community perspective, as well as just hands-on training. So we have some very, very robust tutorials in there for folks to basically get them up to speed really quickly and actually get them building products for our users.
So in our case, we have a calendar for the next 12 months of holidays, special events. Well, obviously Halloween is big for our audience this month and going into the holiday season. So we start with that, then we fill in, of course, given that we're in the Armageddon of all Armageddons right now, we fill in with what does the advertiser want to see? And so if it's Sears or it's an upcoming movie or anything like that, we fill in around compelling items that are going to feature the brand, because we do a lot of branded content. And then if there's time among that, we take a look at some of the features we have coming out, whether it's a movie theater or other types of new features, and make sure that we have compelling items there. And then, of course, you listen to your users, and our users all want Twilight. For those of you who have not read Young Female Meets Vampire and Werewolf, very big among our audience, so Twilight and those types of things, because the users often are quite demanding about Fall Out Boy or Twilight or whatever it is else they want to see, and that drives a lot of where our product development goes.
Good, thank you. So Amy, I know that you have a lot of experience thinking about virtual items in the context of social and virtual worlds, and what the correct mix is between branded items and user-generated content. And so my general question to you is, what challenges have you found are presented by user-generated content inside a given piece of content or world?
That's a great question. Well, quality, appropriateness, those are the biggies. I've had experiences in several different situations. One was at there.com, and I see some, that's actually, IMVU sprang out of that originally, and I see some other There alumni here. We had both branded content and user-generated content in the world when we launched. And we thought the branded content would be much more popular. It was Levi's, Nike, really big brands, new stuff that hadn't come on the market yet. And it turned out there was much more excitement and activity around the user-generated content, which was a big lesson. It doesn't mean that that's not easy to manage. So anyone that tackles user-generated content, or I call it player-generated content, to remind us that it's fun, it's games that we're in here. You have the issue, first of all, of copyright, pornography, appropriateness, hate speech, all the things that every single community provider has dealt with, you know, from AOL and upwards. And you have several different ways you can manage that. You can look at everything ahead of time, but then you're incurring more liability. You can let your users mark what they see as inappropriate, and then you have to go look at it and decide, and there's this constant human intervention gray area of what's appropriate and what's not. Some things are very cut and dried, but there's a management issue there that is both legal and social, in that you're really building the kind of culture that you want. Some other challenges are also ratings, you know, how you can rate them. And you can actually do a lot by letting everybody create things, getting rid of the egregious stuff that really violates your terms of service, and then highlighting the really great stuff using some sort of rating system that can be either implicit or explicit. You can have people rate stuff 1 to 5. You can just surface statistics like how many people looked at an item, how many people are buying the item, how often it's actually been worn or put on in the world, if you have that kind of thing. And those kind of statistics, if you use those to surface the good stuff, can really help you manage the issue of people coming into the world for the first time and saying, oh, what kind of stuff is there here? You want them to see great stuff. You don't want them to see a bunch of crap. So every virtual world deals with it in their own way. One other issue, and then I really want to hear from others, is that I don't think there's one answer at all toward, is branded content more popular or user-generated content? Which should I do? It's completely dependent on the world you're doing and the audience you have and what they're all about. For instance, if you've got an audience of very creative people, Gaia is an example of that. Gaia Online mostly has their own publisher-created virtual goods, and they've got a nice economy going around that. They also have a semi-black market of player-created goods that are coming out of this extremely vibrant arts community that was the genesis of how that world got created. That's something to really pay attention to, that when there's that energy there. On the other hand, if you have a world that's mainstream teenagers who really want to associate themselves with brands because they're playing around with identity and that's part of how they develop their own identity, then obviously branded goods are going to be much more popular and important. So you really want to look deeply at who your audience is, what status means to them, and what kind of skill set and creative energy they have that you can give an outlet to, or perhaps is not there that you really don't want to waste your energy on.
That's good.
Yeah, actually, that was interesting that you mentioned the sort of user-generated versus branded divide. And I'd like to throw out actually a third variant there, which we see a lot on IMVU, which is branded user-generated content, where we have creators that, because they have created lots of products that have become very successful with people, a lot of our users actually have certain brands from certain creators within our community that they really look to and see, you know, when is 808 Racer or Anshi Chung or whatever coming out with something new. So it's not a, you know, corporate brand in a Levi's or you know, Wrangler style there, but more of regular creators who have started to brand themselves as these real entities within our world that then people get really excited about and have the same sorts of loyalties to those brands as they would to some larger corporate brand. So I think it's an important distinction to point out of the kinds of things that will bubble up once you give people the tools to start to do this stuff.
So just to, oh, go ahead.
And I guess what we found is, and Daniel James has found this at Puzzle Pirates as well, is we need to broaden the discussion out a little bit above what's a virtual good. So virtual goods we all talk about goods as if they're clothing items, and that's the most easiest thing we can all think about. It's a vanity item that I go into a room and I see that you've got a jacket on and I don't. But it's actually about a third of the general revenue model in any of these systems, depending on we're all different. But a third of it is also features. So can I levitate in the room? Can I glow? Can I turn invisible? That's a much more obvious thing, actually. It's still a good. It's something you paid for that gives you a functionality that's different than somebody else. But it's not just a vanity good. And then finally, privileges or access. Can I get into some place that you can't? Can I sit in the front row, but no one else can sit there because I bought the pass or I bought the ability to do that? So I would encourage everybody to broaden out thinking more than goods, because actually in a lot of these worlds, you're about 2 inches high. So if you're 2 inches high on a computer screen, the difference between our shirts is not really obvious that that's a cool good and mine is not. So you end up in the extreme, which is I have gold flaming wings, but there's only so many of those items you can sell. So when you look at the whole model, whether branded or unbranded, is you take a look, broaden out beyond vanity items and look at any other aspect of status, because it's actually status is what we're talking about here. We're not talking about goods. We're talking about why do you drive a Mercedes and not a Honda Civic? Why do you wear a jacket and not just a brown sack around you? Why do you cut your hair as opposed to let it go? It's because it's showing status and showing personalization. How you then do that through branded goods or unbranded goods is an aspect of that. But always come back to status, because that's the easiest thing to show, and goods are only part of that.
That's great point.
But just to add sort of to your original question around challenges of UGC is quality, copyright infringement, all challenges, especially the quality, but there's a whole other challenge just around the building and managing of that content creation community itself. The motivations and reasons of those content creators are totally different than your average user of the community that you've already built, and so managing those motivations can be a very tricky task, and it's definitely more than a full-time job. It's not one of these things where you just turn on UGC and let it run. It does take a lot of management and a lot of oversight and a lot of planning in managing those motivations.
Yeah, I think the last point with regard to the quality question is also, I think you have to be very, very clear with regards to what your policy is for your users and creators. We have a very clear virtual goods policy on IMVU that lays out what is acceptable, what's not acceptable, so that there's total transparency for creators as they're creating things. Which I think without that you just get a lot of frustration and also confusion among your base of folks that are starting to build those goods. So you need to be really clear with that up front and make sure that you're then empowering the users and creators in that world to actually police it for you. So to Amy Jo's point earlier around making sure you're leveraging the community, that we have a very strong peer review system that lets creators monitor other creators' products to say, hey, this is okay, this is not okay, per the policy that's been laid out there. And we get lots of community input on that policy all the time.
But it's still messy. There's no way around it. I mean, if I can't say bitch, can I say bitch with an asterisk in the middle? Can I say with 2 asterisks in the middle? Can I say with 7 asterisks in the middle? But we all figure out what it is. Can I show a nipple? Can I show half a nipple? Can I show half a breast? There's no real policy on these things. So eventually on user-generated, you need to work through some sort of guidelines. At the end of the day, in terms of service, you can kick anybody off for any reason you feel like it. So it's not, you don't want to do that because you're managing the community, but it's not as clean cut as one would prefer. And that's why, I apologize, Brian's point is it's really about managing the creators, and IMVU does a wonderful job of this, they're the ones who are driving in a user-generated system a lot of your content, and keeping them happy is often different than keeping the consumers happy.
That's an excellent point as well. So just to follow up on this, all those points raised, Lee, I have sort of a multi-part question for you. You talked about ways in which the community helps police UGC. What tools does IMVU offer to support UGC? And I don't know if this applies specifically to you guys. Have issues of ownership come up around the UGC? Like, who owns UGC at IMVU, or have you had to contend with that at this point?
Yeah, I mean, there's a very clear process for how you're creating items on IMVU. Any product that someone creates is essentially derived from a core base product that was originally created by IMVU. So there's a, if it's a shirt, you're picking a sort of standard shirt template that IMVU has provided, and then you're able to drive off of that. And so then that whole process of creating new products, we track that entire chain of actors on that creative process, so that everyone who is in that process gets paid what they are due for that creation. So if somebody buys a shirt that, that Sean had created off of another shirt that Amy Jo had created that was originally off of an IMVU template, that we make sure that that's all tracked, so that Sean gets his part of that sale, as well as Amy Jo, since she was the creator who then was derived from in the first place, and obviously IMVU gets some of our portion of that sale as well. So it's very important to make sure you have those rights very clear in that chain of sale.
Absolutely. Are there any other tools that you guys offer that you might want to mention to support it?
Yeah,
UGC?
I think, one of the biggest is just having a process for getting your products into the world. Making it very easy for somebody when they create something to see what it's going to be like in your product or your world. We have a feature, the previewer, that just lets people see what it is when they've uploaded their product into the world, and how it's actually going to be looking for them. There's a lot of other things that we want to do in that front to make it even easier for people to get products into the world, but that's something that we're still working on, and hope to make some progress on very soon.
Great. Anyone else want to follow up on that?
This is slightly peripheral, but it's related to everything we're talking about in terms of broadening our definition of virtual goods. Some of what we're seeing now that's exciting are sites that aren't necessarily avatars and worlds targeted to teens, but sites that are targeted to different audiences that break out of the avatar world. There's something I just saw recently called Smilebox, and it's targeted. How many of you have ever heard of that? Oh, cool. It's really interesting. It's targeted at scrapbookers, and it's online scrapbooking. And you can bling out your scrapbook, your online scrapbook. You upload some photos. There's these templates. It's kind of like what Slide and Rock You did on MySpace, but really for scrapbookers. And they have an interesting business model. They sell templates. They also have a $30 a year all-you-can-eat premium service. And it's very much everything we're talking about, but in a different context, on web pages, and really more connected to what's going on in the real world, and targeting a niche, but a very, very strong niche that has time and money to spend. So that's also part of a virtual goods model to think about.
I think a lot of to the question that we originally asked about who's developing or working on a virtual world. A lot of the work that we're doing at Viximo is not with virtual worlds. It's a lot of other different types of social sites, whether they're dating sites or social networks or applications. These virtual goods are basically forms of nonverbal communication, of self-expression and social gestures. And so wherever you have that communication element going on in a product and on the web, there is a likely opportunity for for a virtual goods model. So it's definitely not constrained to these virtual worlds and immersive environments. It can definitely be broadened in terms of the definition of what a virtual good is.
Yeah, if you have a community of any size, social media or otherwise, gaming, and you're not in the virtual good business, you're just missing the boat in a big way. And not that, especially in today's tough economic environment where the ad market may be not as robust as it was for last year or so, virtual goods is the other revenue model in a community-based system that shows status, that allows gifting, that allows those types of folks to communicate and differentiate themselves among a large group of people. And you just can't rely on advertising alone. And virtual goods is the secondary revenue model that, combined with advertising, is really compelling, because you've got a certain percentage of users who are on your site all the time, 2 hours a day, hanging out. Well, you frequency cap out on them almost immediately on an advertising basis. So they're useless from an advertising perspective, but they're still on your site all the time. Virtual goods or virtual services are a great way to monetize that group of core users for you while still having an ad model on top for the rest of the users. It's the combination of those two revenue models that's really powerful, and what I'm surprised we haven't seen so much from the social media sites and the really big communities so far is layering in the virtual goods. And I sit on the board of Two Fish, Lee Crawford's company, which provides the back end for this, and there's some other players in the space right now, but really can move you up to speed quickly on providing a virtual goods system on the back end.
Yeah, I mean, just as an example, IMVU, 90% of our revenues come from virtual goods sales. So it's clearly, especially in this environment, a huge part of the business model that we're very proud to have that set up. And it's something that, on top of that, then you can layer other things that gets to the status points that Sean was talking about earlier, where we have a VIP program where basically, somebody who's really into the product can get a monthly subscription where they get a certain amount of credits every month, and they get a lot of other these core activities or these special status type features that Sean was talking about. For example, I remember, I've only been with IMVU for about a month, but I remember the first time that I was in a public room with a bunch of other avatars, and I was a VIP, and somebody came over, and as often happens in virtual worlds, somebody came over and decided, hey, they were going to give me like a kickbox to my face, and since I'm a VIP, I had an automatic block that my avatar then all of a sudden was able to basically turn away this guy's attack, and that is something of delight that users go, hey, that's flipping cool, and I was as a fairly new user on IMVU, I thought that was really, really important, and those are the kinds of things that I think people in these sorts of worlds will definitely pay for, and actually it's something that we are continually expanding on, those types of special features for VIP customers that makes this yet another part of the business model.
Very good. Okay, so my next question is for Sean. This is kind of a two-parter question that's vaguely related to each part is vaguely related to the other. To what extent, so if we move on to virtual item inventory, how you populate your inventory, to what extent do you allow users to determine what goes into your inventory of virtual items? And then just a follow-up question to that, and this is the unrelated part, how do you go about determining pricing for your virtual items?
Well, pricing's easy. We look at what Gaia prices at and copy it. No. Or we put our finger in the wind and see. So we'll start with pricing. Pricing's interesting. Korea has 4 years ahead of us. If you look at some of the vibrant Korean models in pricing, and you see Second Life as well, and with a much more early adopter audience. So we have a very mainstream teenage audience. This is not cat on dog action and furry costumes. This is folks who like brands hanging out. And when we look at pricing, we have tested a wide variety of pricing levels from as little as 25 cents up to $4. And we find that price elasticity, there is some, meaning it does change the demand curve, but it depends on the item. So only a percentage of your users, depending on how you want to define that percentage, 3, 5, 8%, are ever going to purchase anything. And the power users are going to purchase anything you have if it enhances their status. So for example, we just released VIP for us, not a lot of unique naming conventions, which is a package of privileges and status. We went out at $6 a month and found that the pricing didn't matter. We probably could have even gone $10 a month. So there's a certain set of users that will purchase anything. Then we look at less important items And what we find is, as you'd expect anything, if it doesn't really show off status in some way, then the price goes lower. And so we don't have a full dynamic pricing economy. We do it ourselves, and we're still learning. But so pricing is that way, but it's generally going to be 50 cents to $2.50 currently. There may be many options for different pricing, but right now that's what we see without the benefit of a full secondary market where you'd see dynamic pricing. And that feels right to our users who are used to purchasing ringtones. It also means that when they pre-fund your account with $5, $10, or $25, or they buy the Best Buy card, those types of things, that's about the right side to decrement. So that's pricing, and I think there's still a long ways to go in figuring that one out.
So can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So why didn't you guys go to $10?
It's great. We still may. What is, we rolled out the VIP program, and it's not as fully featured yet as it will be.
Yeah.
And so when we looked at it, you tiptoe into these areas, because by the nature of a VIP program or any type of status or privileges, you are alienating some portion of your audience, and you're bringing joy and delight to some other portion of your audience. So we tiptoed into it, and I think over time there's room for the super VIP, but it's more that we need to gradually move into it.
Yeah.
And there may be a lot more room for pricing above and beyond that. What do we determine goes into it? I mean, users have a huge effect on it. We get 300 suggestions a day of what they want in there. It's almost always music related, or it's angel wings, or anime things, but a lot of it's branded. I want Nikes, I want Air Jordans, I want Lil Wayne's haircut, whatever, those types of things. And some of the stuff in the branded items, which is the focus of the panel, is the value of branded items in the system is not always clear. And so you need to look at it for your audience and see if they want Fallout Boy, should we go get Fallout Boy's rights, whatever that may be, and figure out how to do that. And so we look at what do we think we know, what's the calendar say, and then in addition, really looking at what are they asking for. So in our case, they asked for body types. This will be a funny, so we had one body type in the beginning. We had thin. And we had overwhelmingly demand for multiple body types. My Meez is too thin. And all the men in the room get confused when they hear this. They're like, well, I don't understand, I can be too thin. But our users are primarily female, and our users are, again, not fantasy avatars on the weekends. They're using it on their Facebook profile, their MySpace page, so it has to be them, and not all people are that thin. So we brought out body types. And so right now, 3% of our users choose pregnant every day, 17% choose, I think we call it plus. And the only feedback we get is that plus isn't plus enough, because it doesn't represent them. And that's a key thing, is does it represent them? And the rest use different types. By the way, for men, we are all buff. It is rocking. But I'm not kidding. 80% of our men choose buff because we're all buff. It's very clear. So it's amazing men and women ever get together. But so that was a huge example where we brought out features as well as items and enhancements based on consumer feedback, where it becomes overwhelmingly we want this type of stuff. A lot of times you just get such a spread of demands for all sorts of things that you can't follow up on all of it with a small team. But we try and see what continues to float to the top. And this is how we come up with a lot of our big features.
I want to just pick up on something you said, which is
Am I buff?
Extremely.
I thought it was.
which is that they want to see a certain body type because it's them. So that's a really key shift, and I think we're seeing more and more of that, which is that in games like World of Warcraft or any of the other popular games, you are also engaging in creating your identity, but it's not you. It's your fantasy identity. And there's times when people choose very specifically a fantasy identity. And there's other times when they really want to represent themselves. So another thing when you're parsing out, what do we want to create for our virtual goods model? Is it player created or branded? What choices do we make when we have a limited number of engineering dollars? We have to do things is, are your users wanting to be themselves and engage as themselves, or are they wanting to be a fantasy figure, or both? Do they want to go in and out of that? And every different world puts that down in a different place.
And because in our system, it's not just a destination site, you can take your avatar and move it all. How we started was a portable avatar company, where you take your avatar, and that's how we get most of our traffic, is you put your avatar on your MySpace page and your instant messaging profile, you blog about it, et cetera. And therefore, you generally blog about something that looks somewhat like you, enough that your girlfriend or boyfriend will recognize you. I like to surf, I like Green Day, whatever it is. And we also find we get these questions like, why don't we just put a photo up? Well, photos are just too personal, particularly for women who are a little bit more security conscious, and in addition, less flexible. I can change my avatar every day or twice a day. where I can't really change the photo all the time. It's just a pain. And so avatars allow that less personal, but still it's me and much more flexible in how you change. And that's why we see in real world avatars, and there's vibrant room for fantasy avatars, but what we call an identity avatar, we see lots of room for brands, because if you look around the room today, many of us are wearing brands or associating with brands anyway. And so we want to do that online just like we do offline.
Very good. Okay, so Brian, this is a question I'm sure you're going to really enjoy because it's related to the economy. We feel the storm clouds coming. Given your position working with a variety of content creators, brands, and publishers, how has that impacted the kinds of requests that you're getting? How has that impacted whether people are moving more toward subscription or just microtransactions? And I guess my question in general is, have you seen that concern kind of ripple out to Viximo and in terms of the kinds of requests or support that are being asked of you?
So let me just make sure I understand. Are you asking about what the effect the economy is having on sort of our demand for our product?
Not necessarily, well, either demand on your product, but just sort of how you're finding the folks that you're working with are sort of reacting, or are you seeing that at this point? And okay.
Yeah, so I mean, we're seeing excellent reaction among publishers. I think, the education of virtual goods in the space, especially kind of like the slide that Charles put up at the beginning, it's moved from, what are virtual goods to actually how I do it. I think it's finally being recognized as, this, to monetize social communities, it is a much better way to monetize than, advertising. The metrics are out there that advertising just does not work. In this time where everybody's, hunkering down and focusing on, what they say is really important, which is, revenues and money, I think it's really going to focus towards, instead of just gaining users, is how do I actually monetize these guys, and virtual goods, is that way. So the demand among publishers is very high, and among content creators, they're loving it. We're going after some of the top creative people, in the U.S. to get into our system, and they're really seeing this as a new outlet for their creative work. They're getting their hands into, or they're getting their work into the hands of consumers. It's shifting from sort of a lot of these creative people are used to a client-based business where a client's coming to them out saying, I want you to create this, but now we're empowering them to, create what they want in their virtual brand, and, really getting into the head of the users and the consumer, and what they're going to like and what they're going to engage with. And it's a totally different dynamic, but very exciting for sort of everybody that, we have in our little ecosystem.
Yeah, I think the empowering point is really key here. One of the things, we recently launched profit-based pricing for our creators, so that creators can basically now very easily put in what the margin is that they want to get on a given product that they're selling in our catalog. And so in a situation like this, I mean, we haven't seen much impact yet from the economy, knock on wood here, I guess, but maybe you could look at it as potentially people are going to be spending more time inside and less outside spending dollars, so maybe they'll be actually spending more time in virtual worlds. Still remains to be seen, I guess, but having something like this where creators can control the margins on their products allows them a little bit more flexibility in an environment like this. So essentially you're empowering them to say, hey, you can adjust to the changing environment as it happens in the real world economy or in the virtual world economy. I mean, that's the things we want to make sure that we're giving creators the flexibility on.
Anyone else? So as I lead into my next question for Amy Jo, I just wanted to quickly mention, in case this is interesting or you haven't heard this before, virtual goods represent a $1.5 billion global market. So we're not talking chump change here. And a company called Strategic Analytics predicts that over the next 10 years, 22% of global internet users will have registered for one or more virtual community. So again, we're talking a huge number of people surpassing, World of Warcraft and things that are considered huge successes in the industry. So with that in mind, Amy Jo, I was wondering if you have had any observations or if you can speak to how preferences for virtual items might vary, or do they vary based on gender or age or type of gamer, or whether they're a gamer or just participating in a social world where there aren't necessarily games present.
Oh, that's a big question.
Yeah.
I can just speak to my direct experiences. Many social worlds tend to skew female. Many games tend to skew male, especially games that have a combat mechanic. There's a mix, there's a healthy mix, but you mentioned that it's mostly female in Meez. And what I have observed, I've worked in Ultima Online long ago, which was sort of the beginnings of seeing virtual good pricing on eBay, not internal, but that was one of the first. Ultima Online was one of the first gaming worlds that actually had people buying and selling goods on eBay to go into the world and be a higher level character, or have better armor, have a better steed. That was largely male driven, and it was because of the game demographics. We had a really strong mix of both males and females. By far, while I was there, which was just during part of the tenure, the females were leading the charge with creating the player-created virtual goods. I'm really interested if that's been the case, for instance, at Meez. We saw some males creating some really great stuff, particularly some skinned cars and vehicles, but in terms of the clothing, it was very skewed toward female, and in particular, the very top ones were almost exclusively female. So that was really interesting. In terms of the one other thing I wanted to bring up that I think is very much a virtual goods model and ties into what Fuad said at the beginning. He put up that slide that where we're heading into is based on activity, moving away from pure communication toward activity. I think that's crucial and important. If you look at what's gone on with Rock Band, turned into a big hit, and the music downloads, I would make the case that that's absolutely a form of virtual goods. It's extending the world. And what music downloads in Rock Band, which are many millions, I looked at it, it was 2.4 million some months back and counting. That's been a huge revenue generator for them. And what that is that's a good that exists in the game. You can play it in the game that opens up a new activity. And my understanding is that's cut across gender lines. Rock Band. If anyone has like specific statistics, I'd love to hear them, but there's been both strong male and female. And so I think that as we're thinking about what are we going to do with virtual goods, how do we move forward in this economy, something to really ask yourself is, can I create a virtual goods model in my environment that opens up not just status through visuals, but also opens up new activities to people or extends an existing activity in an interesting way through downloads that can be constantly refreshed and constantly paid for. I think that's definitely going to be the wave of the future.
That's great. Anyone else want to jump in?
I just echo that IMVU, we have about 60% female, 40% male, so it definitely is, females are a big driver of both consumption and creation in the economy.
How does that break down with consumption versus creation at IMVU?
So I don't have the specifics broken down that way, but I could probably get it for you later on. I mean, suffice to say, though, what you were saying around some of the biggest creators being women, that is definitely the case. And, it's no surprise to anyone probably that there's a lot of some of our real big spenders, I guess, heavy users of the product, women who are buying lots and lots and lots of clothing items, for example. So there's someone, we were in a user test the other day, she was saying the day before she had been about 5 hours on IMVU, and one of the things that she was really, really eager to get is a real easy way for her to manage the thousands of products, the thousands of clothing items that she had accumulated and acquired over time. And so I think there clearly is a lot of the woman component in there as far as both consumption and creation.
Great, that's a great response. Sean, did you want to add anything, or?
No, Lee just brought up a good point. Is you have to remember when you build your virtual goods system that it can't just be about you. So it can't just be about one user, because there's only so much stuff you can buy. IMVU has 1.8 million items, but for most places, most people can only buy so many things for themselves because you can only wear so much clothing. Now, if you have a world, then you can have furniture and all that. So you need to look at when you structure the system of gifting is obviously a key part of it. Anything else that implies group dynamics. So in Puzzle Pirates, for example, when you buy a pirate ship for $10, you also then have to purchase a badge. Excuse me, Dan, if I get this wrong. You have to purchase a badge for every member of your crew. So you're actually buying the badges for them, which is how you get status, and then you control the crew, and you have a ship, and all those things. So you're extracting larger amounts of money out of the heavier users, more so than just if they could buy it for themselves. And it's not easy, and no one's figured out all the answers on that, and gifting has some various fraud issues and stuff associated with it. But think about how you can, in a larger system, enable group or community activity that enables your heavier purchasers to buy things for more than just themselves.
That's great. So Lee, can you please speak to where IMVU is found around the world? Like, where the predominance of your users are, and how your international users influence your decisions regarding your virtual item inventory and offerings?
Yeah, it's actually one of the things that when I joined IMVU, one of the things that really struck me was this is a product that is really primarily an English language product. There hasn't been a lot of extensive localization. We're still in beta, but still not a lot of extensive localization or marketing internationally. But we have about 40% of our revenues that come from international. And this is something where we have lots of, the similar spread with regard to the people creating as opposed to just people using the product. So when you're thinking about your virtual goods policy and how you want to lay out your guidelines and mechanisms there, you have to think about those international users as well. We are very clear that we have we're a U.S. product, but and there are certain things that in certain countries you have to be very careful about, what people are creating, but make sure you're very clear when you're setting that up as far as what your plan is for international users, because you build a good product, people are going to want to use it, and people are going to want to be a part of it. Doesn't matter where they are, and I think that's virtual goods and virtual worlds, like most internet products, are in the same way there, where they're global products.
And the key thing to remember is it's hard to monetize non-US traffic, but it's still easier to do with virtual goods. So trying to get to some sort of ad deal with people coming from Romania or Nigeria is tough unless you're huge in those countries, and most of us are not. So smaller companies without necessarily extensive ad sales teams, really virtual goods are assuming you have a payment backend infrastructure with a lot of different payment systems, from premium SMS to prepaid cards, et cetera, to a great backend system that can handle international payments, which you can get from a third party or develop yourself. And that's where you start to actually drive revenue. I'm not saying it's going to change your world overnight, but it is an easier way to drive revenue than to assume that somehow banner ads for Nigerians are going to get better than 2 cents a click or 2 cents a CPM. Nothing against Nigeria.
Yeah, payments is a big piece of that international equation. We spend a lot of time on understanding what are the international payments providers out there in various regions and various countries that will actually allow us to extend our economy into various countries, especially since we do have a base of users that often might be younger, might not have credit cards, those sorts of things. So you need to find ways to get whether it's SMS in certain countries or other sort of substitute type credit card products that you then can bring those third-party providers into as an option for people purchasing on your service.
So we have time for one more question, and then I think maybe a few minutes for audience Q&A. So Sean, I read recently that Meez launched AEG Mansion. You guys recently did a deal, I would imagine, with AEG Live, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the largest concert promoters in the country. Can you please speak to the kind of feedback you're getting and any kind of data or information you can share on the reception, whether it's anecdotal or actual numbers?
Yeah, absolutely. So we did a deal with AEG for the Rock Band Live Tour bands. So it's Dashboard Confessional and The Cab and a bunch of bands in the emo category that are very big right now with our users. You know what you find in virtual worlds or rooms? We have a bunch of people who are interested in a certain activity. It could be just meeting each other, or it could be they all like emo music. They all like Premier League soccer. They all like something like that. They get together in a room with similar fans. They hang out. They watch video. They listen to music. So with AEG Live focus, this was a big set of bands that our users had requested. And it's been incredibly popular. There's a whole mansion, and we'll continue to fill it in with new artists as they go on tour. And it's a way for AEG to both promote the tour, get tickets sold, downloads, iTunes, those types of things, because they all link off the site. It's a way for us to bring branded content into the site that we know our users are interested in, that they want to associate around. And we saw this recently with a musician called Curly, Kerli, who is an Estonian singer, kind of goth pop, which for our goth audience, which is a decent size of our audience, people love. They love the dress-up outfits, they love the look and the feel, and they love to scream "Love is Dead" over and over again. And you get tired of hearing the same song. But and so what we find is with branded goods, and this was kind of the panel, but branded goods in general, we found that are a great promotional vehicle. It's not 100% clear yet that our users are willing to pay for branded goods at any type of level that would make a dent in the branded goods licensing revenue line. So we have deals with Major League Baseball and hockey and soccer, and so you can get jerseys and all that. And we sell the items, but realistically for these multi-billion-dollar franchises, it's not clear yet that if you want to go to a premium model, and there's a couple companies now trying this, you're going to wipe out probably 99% of your users. Now that's okay, but the numbers aren't going to be very big in the short run, and so it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. I think there'll be room for premium models, but if it's promotional and you've got a new album coming out, you want to go free, no question. If you got a highly branded and premium item, you might want to go premium on it, but you have to be aware that the premium branded good business in the U.S. is currently quite small, and versus a lot of other options, and so that's the kind of trade-off we see for AEG. It's a marketing and promotional tour that we do with a lot of bands, and we find that it's incredibly effective at driving, probably 5,000 users a day. Average engagement time in the room is 7 minutes, so they hear 2 songs. The click-out percentage is roughly 2.5% that go off to either buy tickets or download the iTunes tracks, and the vibe and the buzz around it among the community is quite large. And so that's really what's been working well for our music partners.
That's great. Great information. Thank you. So with that in mind, I think we have a few minutes for questions. Did I see someone raise their? The gentleman with the microphone over there.
Hi. I was actually a little surprised to hear both of you guys mention a VIP subscription level, because my limited understanding of your services, I thought most of the transaction model was you purchase virtual currency and then there's some items that are free and some percentage of them that you spend the virtual currency on, which is a proxy for real money. I'm wondering if you can speak to some of the challenges or a bunch of questions, kind of like what percentage of goods need to be free versus charging currency for them? What kind of spread do you see on currency? Like, it's something shouldn't be 100 times the price of another thing, because then it starts to lose meaning. And just some of the challenges with pricing those things to make sense to the users but still result in meaningful revenue for you.
I'll take that one.
Yeah, so as far as on IMVU, to clarify, people do purchase credits, and then those credits can be used to buy virtual goods. There's also a certain amount of promotional credits that we give every user when they first start out with their avatar, so kind of get people started with the buying process. And then the VIP service, which is a monthly subscription or a quarterly subscription or an annual, those sorts of things, that gives someone a certain batch of other credits per month plus a number of other features. So it's kind of a combination there, but the credits are what you are using in the world to buy the currency. So
you're looking at market sector. To Amy Jo's point about Smilebox, Andrew Wright, who runs that, does a phenomenal job, and he and I talk a lot about there are different types of users. So your less active users, you're going to sell advertising around. Not everybody has to, but we do. The somewhat more active users are a la carte purchasers. They may buy one item, they may then buy another item a month later, those types of things. Then for the high end, You may have in your model, which we have now, a subscription offering, or it could be paid for by credits, that gives you a set of privileges that for the hardcore, they want to go off and differentiate themselves. So it's another way to segment out your marketplace on less active, more active, and really active. They're not exclusive. So for example, what we find since we launched VIP is people buy the VIP, and then they also buy a lot of credits to buy more stuff. So essentially, it's an incremental status and reward mechanism on top of the fact that at core, you're still purchasing items with credits. And so it's just another way to especially in today's more difficult climate, to segment out the marketplace and extract more cash per user.
If I could follow up. So what I'm particularly interested in is, given that model, how do you think about where you draw the line? So for example, you could say that people get enough free credits that they can buy approximately 20, an hour's worth of interaction per day, and we know that an hour's worth of interaction is where the line draws between casual users and power users, so that's where you have to start doing a la carte or something.
You take a look at your sinks and sources of currency. So it's no different than Alan Greenspan, who in hindsight did a terrible job, but still at the time was, you look at how much money's coming into you look at your float, your A1, S1, whatever it is, what the old float currency is, how much currency each week comes into your system, however it's done, purchased, given away, etc. How much is extracted through payments, effectively, or other methods you may have it. And then you keep tweaking that model. And the idea is to get it roughly in line, or you have an inflationary environment, and if you don't have it in line, it's a deflationary environment. So that's the way you keep modeling it, is looking out, for example, decreasing the amount of free credits you give over time and giving people more ways to generate credits by activities on the site is arguably of more value than just they show up, you give them lots of stuff. So, and then later, obviously, move them down the purchasing path. And I wouldn't say we've got it nailed down by any means, but it is relatively straightforward to look at your inflows and outflows of currency each week and make sure that you have a great reporting system. It also helps you track fraud, which is endemic in parts of these systems. And then you take a look and keep tweaking pricing, keep tweaking how much you give away, how much people spend, those types of things.
Yeah, I mean, make no mistake, these are economies. So a lot of the same dynamics you would see in a real world economy you see in these worlds. For example, a lot of our creators who are very successful, they build up huge balances of credits as users are purchasing their products, so they end up with a bunch of credits. So those then creators that are successful turn into resellers themselves. They sell back credits to other users at a discount versus what IMVU would sell the credits at. And those resellers are actually a key part of the system in that they allow creators to cash out, because creators have a bunch of credits, and when they sell them to users, they get real money. And it's good for users in that users get discounted credits. Granted, as IMVU and Miss Greenbacks is our banker, is called online, the sort of avatar that we have for that. It's a lot to keep track of, but we do the same sort of thing with regard to sinks and faucets and what's coming into the system, going out of the system, and definitely something you have to manage. I mean, we have people full time that are focused on that sort of thing.
So we have time for one more question.
Hey, Margaret.
I'm curious to hear about fraud scenarios that have come up in your virtual worlds and what you guys have done to kind of combat that.
You have two issues, and IMVU probably has a more severe case just by nature of a more sophisticated economy. You have community management in general, so management of griefing, management of security, those types of things, which involves banning and warning and all those. And then you have fraud on the financial side. As soon as you allow cash out of any type, your fraud goes up. And as soon as you get to any size, your fraud goes up. So for example, we have a game on our site called Filler, which we license from a third party. And there's clearly a flash game hack, which is quite popular, that allows you to essentially finish the entire game in an automated manner, because it generates currency and generates awards. So we, based on feedback from other folks, now throw out all those scores automatically. So when we see fraud on our case, which we don't allow currently any type of cash out scenario at this time, it's mostly about having great reporting tools, figuring out where then to block or ban people, whether it's for griefing or it's whether for actual fraud, and then starting to tighten down your economy as those holes appear. And the larger you get, the more people start to go after you, no different than any financial system. So it really comes down to great reporting, taking a look at so that you see these holes as they appear, and then taking a look at different techniques people can use to ban or block those users from continuing to do so. But it's like all security things, it's an ongoing battle.
Yeah, I mean, it predates my tenure at IMVU, but a long time ago, there was, I think once you get to a certain level of traction and success, the fraudsters just come after you. And so you need to have systems. I think it's just growing pains that any company in this space will face. As you get successful, people will come after you with that. And you just need to make sure you have folks that know how to handle those things, know what the typical scenarios are. I previously ran a product for Yahoo Personals, and we had the same sort of thing back then. It's just they move from different credit card online products, and as things start to get successful, they see, oh, hey, I can launder a bunch of stuff here, launder a bunch of stuff here, and find loopholes. But it's just part of running the business, and it's just something you have to be aware of and plan accordingly.
And I think it's one opportunity where we as an industry may have an opportunity to share information across, there's obviously privacy issues, but share information across companies. Because this is the locust effect. They just go from field to field, wiping it out and moving on to the next one. And so to a certain extent, if you can slow it down by understanding it as it comes in rather than waiting till the damage is done, there may be some benefits to that.
Well, I think that's all the time we have. I really want to thank our panelists. Really, thank you for sharing your experiences and your data and observations. And thank you to the audience. You've been really awesome. And thanks for your questions as well.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you.